Good morning. Welcome to the Celtic Way Morning Briefing Live. As ever, I'm Tony Haggerty, a Haggerty10 Twitter handle. You know that by now. And I'm joined today by Alison McConnell. How are you, Alison? You all right?
I'm just heating up, thanks. It's a chilly morning this morning. A kind of stark contrast to the summer weather that we had over the weekend.
Indeed, there was a small flurry of snow in East Kilbride this morning, but that's dissipated. It's gone away. That's all right. So do the housekeeping first. As you can see at the bottom, another incredible deal. If you subscribe to the Celtic Way, it'll cost you £1 a month for the first 2 months. And you know what to do. Just log on to celticway.co.uk/subscribe. So that's the business taken care of, Alison. Now, international break has come and gone. Ange Postecoglou must be rubbing his hands in glee, Alison. It's not like other international breaks. The only blip in Stephen Welsh.
I think he'll just be pleased, yeah.
Yeah, so Stephen Welsh groin injury, but he might not have featured at Ibrox anyway, so that's the only blip on the horizon. Everything else clean bill of health?
Yeah, I think he'll just be pleased that everyone's come back in the same shape as he left, obviously apart from Welsh, but I think he would have been pleased too that Callum McGregor didn't feature last night, Greg Taylor didn't feature last night. Just let's get ready really now for Sunday. There's no knocks and bruises coming back that we're aware of. I think I would agree. I think you'd feel a bit of sympathy for Stephen Welsh, but I don't think it would have affected the starting lineup in any way for the game on Sunday.
Question of full steam ahead now for Celtic, isn't it? And whatever 11 he selects.
Yeah, I think now it'll just be a case of getting everyone back from around the globe, getting them into Lennoxtown, just assessing where they are in terms of fitness and physicality and shape, and then just starting the preparations in earnest as it goes on for the game on Sunday at Ibrox. I think everyone understands the magnitude of it. I think if Celtic were to come away with 3 points, I think really they would be strong favourites to go on and win the title after that. And I think Ange Postecoglou will set up to win that game. I think you know his philosophy by now. You know how he'll go. I think he'll be looking to recreate the tempo and momentum that was evident when Celtic played Rangers in February at Celtic Park.
I don't know if he had the bat phone to various international managers, but we'll go through it, Alison. McGregor and Taylor, Clark rested them last night. Starfelt was rested. O'Reilly played 20 minutes for the under-21s. Denmark. Abada played the full 90 minutes for Israel under-21s. Juranovic was rested for Croatia. Welsh got injured after 50 minutes for Scotland under-21s. Hatate played 45 minutes for Japan. And Giakoumakis played 35 minutes for Greece. Now that, as I say, I don't know. You know Angie's thoughts on international football, but that's a kind of dream international night for him, isn't it? Where all these players don't particularly feature for any great length of time.
Yeah, I think more importantly, rather than featuring, is the fact that no one has picked up a knock or an injury. I think Hatate will be going back, boosted by the fact that Japan have qualified for a World Cup, and I think that then there's a real incentive to do enough to get into that squad for going to the World Cup at the end of the year. And similar with Scotland, I think the performances have been decent. I think you would hope that your players who've been away in international duty just come back, not bruised by the experience, either literally or metaphorically, but come back with a bit of a spring in their step and ready to refocus.
Yeah, I mean, we're now 3 days away, Thursday, Friday, so yeah, 3 days away from Ibrox on Sunday. Does the excitement build with yourself, Alison? Do you get excited this early, or does it come a bit later on in the week for yourself?
To be honest, I think it's just about work, Like I don't. I don't think I would. I think it's just about trying to make sure deadlines are met before then, and just trying to work towards it. I'm sure within the Celtic camp, it'll be trying, and at Ibrox, it'll be just trying to keep it as steady and on an even keel as possible. I think if you're a manager, I think you would probably try and play down the magnitude of the game to the players. Well, obviously stressing them. I don't think you have to stress the importance. People know, and players aren't stupid. They can see what it means. But I think it's probably just about trying to not overhype it, just trying to keep it in an even keel and reinforce the philosophy that you have and work towards it. I think at this stage, when you're bringing back players from international duty, I think it's really just about recovery, about ensuring that they're physically ready. Some of them have had very long journeys, making sure they're hydrated, rested, over any jet lag, and just getting them onto the park. And I think by this stage of the season, everyone knows what's expected of them. You know the style of play that's there. It's just about, from Celtic's point of view, I'm sure it will be about trying to impose that on Rangers.
I mean, you compare and contrast the international breaks, this one to a couple of others during the season, Alison, where Celtic kind of seem to be cursed by injury jinxes and stuff. I mean, it is the best possible outcome now for Ange, as you say. It's just about getting the players ready, isn't it? And in his mind, the team that he's going to play.
Yeah, I think it's just about luck. I'm sure you go through phases where you feel like you maybe don't have one injury, but you have half a dozen. I think sometimes it just feels when your luck's out in that way that you seem to have a catalogue of problems. That seemed to be what it was like for Celtic in that opening half of the campaign. He could never quite just get a full quota available to him. I think that's been different. And also, it was eased by the fact that the January window was so productive in terms of players who came in who were first team ready, who came in and genuinely offered a bit of depth and scope for change when people are out. But yeah, I'm sure he'll just be relieved that there's nothing major to deal with, that players have gone away. And I'm sure he'll be keen to get them back now and just maybe work on one or two things ahead of Sunday's game.
You said we can't overestimate it or overhype it. Andrew Giakoumakis' biggest game of the season, they all know it. Do you go along with that, Alison? Do you go along with that school of thought?
I would agree. I think it's certainly a fairly definitive game in shaping how the title may play out. I think, I'll reiterate, I think if Celtic win the game, I think I would strongly suspect them to go on and win the league. I think, apart aside from a 6-point gap, I think there's a mental element that then comes into play. If it's a draw, I think it remains eachy peachy. I think it remains in the balance, and I think if Rangers win, it's wide open again. I think it would be anyone's guess. So I think it's a fairly significant afternoon. But from a player's point of view, I think you want to keep everyone just on an even keel, just knowing exactly what your job is, not getting too emotional about the occasional and the occasion, and just simply going out and trying to replicate the kind of form of recent weeks. I would say in the last 3 or 4 outings, I think Celtic have went through the gears. I think they've hit a fairly fluent run of form. I think there's been goals, they've looked very comfortable. Instead of maybe scraping games with a 1-0 or a 2-1, they've started to turn it up a bit, which would be in keeping with what we've spoken about before about Ange Postecoglou saying he tries to time it, that his teams hit their peak getting into the latter stages of the campaign, and the evidence of recent weeks would suggest that is the case. And I think a win at Ibrox would truly put them in the driving seat for the title, but I think it's a very easy thing to say. It's a far harder thing to do.
Yes. Now, where do you stand on Kyogo, Alison? Do you put him on the bench just for the fear factor and the fact that he might come on and do something, or is that a waste of a substitute, or do you think it would give everybody a boost in Celtic persuasion it just for his presence alone to be there?
I think it's a difficult question to ask because we don't really have a handle on where he is in terms of fitness. I think it very much comes down to whether or not he's fit. I would think it's absolutely pointless having him on the bench if he's not capable of making any kind of contribution, or if there is a risk of exacerbating an injury that's kept him out for the last 3 months. So I think it very much depends on where he is with his rehabilitation, whether or not he feels as though he's match fit, whether or not he's something to offer. If he is fit, then I would certainly suggest that being on the bench would offer a significant boost for Celtic, even if he was coming on for the last 15 or 20 minutes. I think it would elevate the mood within the Celtic camp. But I would stress, I think it has to be genuine. I think he has to be fit. and able to offer something. Otherwise, yeah, I would take your point. I think it would be far more sensible to have someone that you can rely on and someone to bring on. I don't think, even if he is fully fit, I would be surprised if he was to start the game, given the length of time that he's been out for. I think, of course, we could be wrong. I think there's been a few surprises this season, and we could call it completely wrong. But my own feeling would be that if he is fit and capable of making a contribution, then it would be from the bench.
I know you and Sean spoke about the midfield options the other day on the briefing. Up front, do you expect it to be the three that we've seen in recent weeks? Maeda, Giakoumakis and Jota? Or does Abada come into the reckoning, even Forrest for that matter? Are you convinced that it's going to be the first three?
I think there's a decision to be made there. My gut feeling would be that it makes sense to go with players who have been in form in recent weeks, and I think Maeda's work rate is notable, apart from anything else. And I think Giakoumakis obviously is the man of the moment, really, for Celtic, given his recent contribution, 11 goals that have come since the turn of the year. And Jota, I think, is one of the real creative elements in that front three, capable of creating something from very little and capable of being a real sort of playmaker role at times. I think my suspicion would be that would be the front three. I think the only one that would really be up for debate would be really whether you go with Maeda, Abada or Forrest, but my suspicion would be it would be Maeda.
But you mentioned those three players, Alison, and you're saying Maeda is your first choice. You look at Forrest and Abada, they're more than able deputies in that position. That's real healthy competition for places in the attack, isn't it?
And I think it also gives you scope to change things within the game if it's not going your way or it's not working, or you feel as though you're not imposing yourself in the way that you would like to. I think James Forrest is a hugely experienced player in this kind of fixture. I think I've spoken repeatedly. I think he's fairly underrated at times. I think he's a big game player and has been over recent seasons in terms of his contribution and fairly high profile encounters. I don't think he's fazed by it. So I think he's struggled obviously with injury. He's been back in and just you'd had a glimpse of him getting back to peak fitness, then another knock. So it would depend whether or not he's fully fit. But I think he's a very decent option to have to come off the bench to change things if it's not working.
You spoke about the man of the moment. Can he be the man of the moment on Sunday, Alison? Can Giakoumakis write himself into Derby folklore by scoring against Rangers? He did everything but score in the 3-0 game at Celtic Park.
Yeah, and since then you would say that his confidence has probably gone up, just given the goals that have come. I think you've maybe seen them come to the fore in terms of just growing into that role of being a Celtic striker. I think all his goals tend to come within the 6-yard box. So I think whether or not he scores or makes a name for himself at Ibrox very much depends on the wide players and people getting balls into the box, into the areas that where he can be fairly lethal. So I think if you can get the right supply into him, at the minute, he looks as though everything he touches ends up in the back of the net, which is a nice place to be for a striker.
Will he cop some treatment, Alison, for his previous comments about being a better team than Rangers in every department, and he believes that Celtic will win the title, or is that just part and parcel of life of being a footballer? You say things sometimes and that's the way it is.
I think maybe if Celtic don't win the game, I think maybe there might be a reference to it or there might be a remark. But I think, to be honest, I think enough distance is probably between those comments and the game. I think probably maybe not forgotten, but maybe just on the back burner. I'm sure playing at a full Ibrox, there'll be plenty of Celtic players who might find themselves on the back of a few choice comments.
I mean, these are the kind of games that motivate players, isn't it, Alison? That, as you say, it's one of the commenters said it is the biggest game of the season. It tends to bring out the best in players. And where do you see it being won and lost?
I think it very much depends on how Celtic start. I think what you saw with the game at Celtic Park was that Celtic started at a fairly ferocious tempo. I think Rangers just looked shell-shocked. They were like a rabbit in the headlights for the opening stages. I think if Celtic start the same way, and I think they will look to start the same way, whether or not they get the same amount of space and the same ability to dictate play remains to be seen. But I think probably the midfield is the real crucial areas, and the two wide areas, because so much of how Celtic play middle to front depends on that, and making sure that they're using the width and getting balls into the box. But I think what you know you're going to get is a fairly open game. I think Rangers themselves will know it's almost win or bust. I think they know they really have to go for the jugular too. So I think you'll see both teams entirely committed to going and trying to win it, trying to get the 3 points. And I think it's a huge occasion. It's a big encounter. And both of them will want to come out and win it. And both have experienced players. Both have players who understand the magnitude of the game and know essentially how to handle themselves in that occasion. I don't think anyone there is really phased. I think they've all had a taste of it. Now some of the Celtic players, it might have been their first experience of it back in February. This might be a different thing altogether, given that you're going across the city to Ibrox that holds 700 Celtic fans. I think it'll be a very different kind of atmosphere. But I think experienced international players aren't fazed by it. I think they know what's expected of them, and it's about whether or not they go and can just play their own game.
Rangers need to win is probably greater, I would say. And as you say, they might come out and have a go. Can that play into Celtic's hands a bit, just the way they're playing? And they can be picked off if they go toe-to-toe with Celtic in terms of going for the win as well?
Oh, I think I'm not sure if it plays into Celtic's hands, but I certainly think it's a more comfortable environment for Celtic to play in because there's more space.
Yeah.
It's not the kind of stodgy games where you've seen them struggle at times this season and breaking down, heavy midfields and trying to get in behind teams that are maybe playing with 10 men behind the ball. I think Celtic will relish the fact it's an open game. I think it'll be you would expect it to be a fairly open attacking game from both sides. I think both teams know that there's a significant prize for coming out on top here.
Now, Celtic used the crowd to their advantage in February, Alison. Can the crowd play a big part in this game? I know people say crowds don't score goals, fans don't score goals, but it was evident Celtic's 3-0 game at Celtic Park that the crowd gave the players a major lift in that game because they got behind them straight from the off, didn't they?
Yeah, I think it's a circular thing. I think you can create a lot of noise, but I think what you need then is that to be reflected with what happens on the pitch. I think so long as what you're seeing on the pitch is going down well, then you get an appreciative return from the crowd. I think both feed off the energy of one another. I'm sure Rangers will look to use it to their effect. I'm sure it's going to be a fairly raucous environment. It'll be noisy. They'll try and make it as intimidating as possible for Celtic. I think the small band of Celtic supporters that are going in might find themselves drowned out at times, depending on how the game plays out. But if Celtic impose their game in Rangers, then you can essentially really, I'm not sure if you could mute the stadium, but you definitely feel as though the volume turns down a bit. And I would say the converse of that is true. If Rangers are on top and there's a lot to get excited about, then the noise levels of the crowd reflect it.
Well, Alison, we'll reconvene on Friday. Won't ask you for a prediction or a team lineup just yet. We've got that joy to come possibly on Friday, but always appreciate your contribution. And as I said at the start, the housekeeping bit, you want to subscribe and you'll see good videos like this and all sorts of contributors and all sorts of analysis, data analysis, stats and features on the website. Then you can log on and it's £1 a month for the first 2 months. And if you log on to celticway.co.uk/subscribe, that would be great. Thanks very much for your contribution, Alison. Enjoy it. I'll see you on Friday.
Thank you.
And guys, have a wonderful Wednesday. All the best. Take care.